Hello, and welcome to podcast number 3 of the Your OKC Property Manager podcast. Today's episode is titled Transforming Your Home into a Rental Property. The premise is this. Suppose you have to move to another state. What do you do with the house you own? You decide to rent out your house, maybe because you plan on coming back to OKC someday. Or perhaps the market isn't great right now to list your house to sell. Or maybe you want to hold on to the home as an investment long term. Maybe a combination of all of these things. I'm here with Scott Nachatilo, broker and owner of OKC Home Realty Services LLC, one of the top property management companies in Oklahoma City metro area. We'll be breaking down this topic today. Be sure to like the episode if you learned something here and follow to catch our next one. Scott, thank you for joining us here today. Can you share some about this scenario?
Sure. It's actually a pretty common thing. I've dealt with this dozens of times where really people are looking at holding on to their property rather than going ahead and selling it. Part of this is because the interest rates are higher right now, and so the market to sell the home may not be as good as the sellers would like. And instead of just having that property sit on the market for months and months without selling, they're going another route, and that's to have the property rented out. The way for this scenario to really work out for the owner most favorably is for the owner to get a property management company involved. And the main reason for that is that, let's say if this owner is 3 or 4 states away and they have some kind of problem with the property, like, let's say that there's even like a minor maintenance thing that goes on. What are they going to do? Well, a lot of them do not have 3 or 4 contractors that they can reliably bring in to get that fixed. They're not like us where they can just send out a maintenance technician at the drop of a hat to get that item fixed. Also, there's renting the property out. You have to advertise the unit and show up to let potential renters in to see the property. There is getting rental applications and screening those applications. And boy, just making darn sure that you do not put a person into the property who's going to stop paying rent or tear up the property. And all of a sudden now you're 3 or 4 states away and you have to do an eviction. And you've never done an eviction before. Don't know the first thing about it. That's why you get a property management company involved.
What factors should someone consider when choosing a property management company?
There's all kinds of little things that a property management company does for the owner. Maybe one of the first things to look at is just getting on Google, doing a search for property management in Oklahoma City, and then looking at the reviews. People are familiar with knowing how reviews work. I mean, they should know that it's hard to fake reviews, although sometimes it happens. What you want to see is a company that has at least maybe say 200 reviews and at least a 4-star rating. It doesn't happen very often that property management companies have like a perfect 5-star rating, just because sometimes we do things that are unpopular, and tenants especially, they get mad at us and post reviews because they don't like it when we have to, let's say, enforce a part of the lease that they don't necessarily agree about. So, your property management company isn't going to have a perfect 5-star rating, but expecting at least a 4-star rating is very reasonable.
And reading the reviews and seeing what they say, if they're from tenants and owners.
Yeah, and I would say that one thing to take into consideration is how many negative reviews are posted from owners, you really shouldn't see many. The reviews from owners should really be mostly 5-star reviews, and they should basically tell a pretty happy story about their experience with that property management company. And the reviews from tenants ought to be a little bit of a mixed bag. Angry tenants that are hateful, but there's going to be mostly good reviews.
Okay, so at what point should someone looking to rent out their property start talking with property management companies?
So as soon as they have pretty sure that they want to at least consider this option, start talking right away. You'll find that there are a number of companies out there that you can talk to. I think it's a good idea to talk to at least 3. Figure out what are the top 3 companies and talk to those 3 companies. You'd get a pretty good flavor for what to expect and what the pricing is and what these companies are offering.
Is there anything you should specifically look out for when talking to a property management company?
Make sure that they are offering a full service, a full scope of services. That's going to include renting out the property. They should have all the maintenance taken care of so that you don't have to ever get involved with finding your own contractors or handymen. They should be sending you accounting every single month. And so they should be sending an itemized monthly statement every single month. They should be providing you access to platform or the database so that you can log in and look at your accounting records whenever you want to. They should be able to do an eviction if they need to, and they should be able to really handle just about any kind of request in association with leasing out, renting the property. They should be set up to handle all of those things.
Okay, great. So, what legal requirements should a homeowner be aware of before renting out their property?
Well, for the most part, you're going to be able to lease out your property. It's going to be pretty rare where there are going to be restrictions on you that will prevent you from doing that. An example might be a condo. In some places, the condo board puts restrictions on leasing, and so I think in some places they don't allow it. In some places, they make it really hard to do that, where they'll require that the board review all of the rental applications, and they give 2-3 weeks to get back on those rental applications. So you might want to check if you have a condo and you want to do some leasing. Check on what requirements are there for your specific condo about leasing, and you could do the same thing with the home. If you have a home in a neighborhood that maybe is a little bit persnickety about leasing, in some newer neighborhoods they won't let you put a for rent sign in the yard. That's an example, but those are really about the extent that I've seen here in Oklahoma City.
Interesting. So, since it's your house, what are the essential steps that you need to take to prepare the property to be rented out?
Well, if you have a newer home, and by newer, I'm calling that like 10 years old or less, you don't really have to do anything other than just get the property really cleaned up nicely.
You mentioned newer home. So, with an older home, are there any necessary upgrades you need to make to the property to get it ready to rent?
There might be. The main thing is that everything needs to be out working. Your plumbing, your electrical, your heat and air, all those things need to work properly. You don't necessarily have to have the most updated property in the neighborhood. Wouldn't advise putting money into the house to make upgrades just because you don't have, let's say, quartz, the latest quartz countertops. If they're Formica countertops,
Makes
but they're in
sense.
good shape, that's going to be fine.
So say I'm got my house and I'm ready to move and I really don't want to focus on the repairs. Is that something after we signed a management agreement with you as a property manager? Is that something you all could help with, getting the house repaired in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. We have an in-house maintenance team, and we have a long list of contractors, electricians, plumbers, heat and air. We can have all those things taken care of on on behalf of the owner, including setting up to get the property cleaned up. If the owner runs out of time and they need help cleaning up the property, no problem. We'll provide a cost for that and get that service provided professionally. We do it all the time. I mean, the thing to keep in mind is we do these things all the time. We've done them thousands and thousands of times before. So, none of this stuff is ever a surprise to us.
Should a homeowner consider including utilities in the rent?
Not normally. Normally, the utilities are paid all by the tenant. It's just normally that's the way it's done.
Okay, so with you moving out, should you turn off the utilities before the property management company comes along?
No, we need to keep those utilities on until the property is leased out. So you'll want to leave those utilities on, leave all of them on, the electric, the water, and the gas. We don't need internet and those kinds of things. I mean, like if you have monitoring for a security system, it's kind of optional up to you whether or not you want that kept active while the property is vacant. But it's not necessary to keep that on. Not absolutely necessary.
And does the owner pay for lawn care, like getting the lawn mowed and keeping up with that type of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Once they move away, we're able to provide that service to keep the lawn mowed while the property is vacant. That's no problem at all. We have a lawn crew that can get that done affordably on the owner's behalf and keep it, we want to keep that lawn looking great while we're advertising the property and trying to get it rented out. The usual thing is to stop that service once the tenant moves in, and at that point the tenant is responsible for keeping the lawn mowed. The owner can do that, but just from my experience, it's better to put that onto the tenant because the owner will not really be able to recoup that cost very easily from the tenant, especially if you try to include that with the rent. It's best to put that responsibility onto the tenant.
Why is it important to document the property's condition before renting it out?
Yeah, this is another one that the property management company should be taking care of, but it doesn't hurt the owner on their end to also get through the house, get photos and videos of the property, just as kind of a backup in case. I mean, things happen with the property management company. Sometimes unforeseen things can happen. So just to be completely safe on your end, you want to have the original condition of the property documented in case, let's say, the tenant lives in the property for 3 years, and at the end of that time they move out, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of damage in the property. The tenant says, well, wait a minute, the property was like that when I moved in. No, it wasn't. Well, guess what? You've got to have documentation. You have to have proof of that in order to, let's say, hold back those funds from the security deposit. So that's why it's important to document what the condition of the property is before that tenant moves in.
How can homeowners accurately determine the right rental price for their property?
Well, there's a couple of simple things that you can do. One is just to hop on Zillow, and they have an estimated rent that you can look at. That's not always just super accurate, but it's within the ballpark of reason. It's just based on what similar properties, like even in your neighborhood or nearby, renting for. And the property management company can provide you an estimated rent for your property. We will always do that at no cost for our for people when we're talking to them at this stage of the conversation. If we're talking with them about potentially getting their house rented out, we will provide that information and let them know what we think that the property would rent for.
So should the owner rely solely on your advice as the property manager regarding pricing?
Maybe not solely. I mean, obviously, if you're speaking with several property management companies, I mean, ask them all about what they think the property will rent for. And you want to be a little bit careful about a property management company that says they can rent the property for way more than what Zillow says, or way more than the other two guys. There's such a thing as just trying to get the listing for that property and just saying, whatever it'll take to get that. I don't like doing that, because it's an uncomfortable conversation to have to come back later to the owner and say, well, we were wrong by $200 a month about what this property will rent for. While that property's been sitting on the market for more than 60 days and hasn't rented, hasn't leased. So, just kind of take those numbers with a grain of salt a little bit.
So you mentioned the rent price needs to be pretty accurate. Can you tell me more about the tools that you have to make sure you're getting it right on the mark when it comes to telling a new owner what their house will rent for?
We have a report that we will send them that takes into account the rental prices for properties that are nearest to their particular home, that are similar construction, similar, and similar size and that type of thing. Does statistics. What you find is that if you have very similar properties to the one that you're wanting to have leased out, in terms of, like I said, their size, their construction, and their condition, and upgrades and that sort of thing, you find that especially with newer homes, like in some of the newer neighborhoods, then you can rely on something called the median rent for that neighborhood, and it's going to be close to what the listing price is for the property. Where it becomes more difficult is cases where the homes are very different, and let's say that's a neighborhood where you've got some newer homes, built-in lots, mixed in with a bunch of older homes, and the homes are like different sizes. In those cases, it's a little more difficult to estimate what the rents are going to be for that property. And I don't care who it is, unless they have really specific knowledge about a property they've been leasing for a long time that's the same on that same street. They're not going to be able to just walk into the house and say, oh, this is exactly what it'll rent for. So there is a little bit of an art form to estimating rents accurately.
What type of insurance should a landlord have before renting out their property?
Most of the time, that homeowner is going to have homeowners insurance. And it's just simply a matter of getting that policy changed over to a landlord's policy. What the homeowner would do is just contact their insurance carrier and request that change be made. It's that simple.
So, how does a landlord insurance differ from a homeowner's insurance policy?
With a homeowner's policy, the homeowner is insuring their personal things in the home. And so, for example, if the home burned down, they would have replacement coverage for the items in the house. Obviously, with the landlord's policy, they no longer have items in the home, and so there's no need for them to cover those personal items. So that's why the premium for a landlord's policy should be less than the homeowner's policy. The homeowner needs to make sure that they have a decent liability policy in place. What we would recommend is about $1 million umbrella policy for the property. And $1 million sounds like a lot, but just in terms of the price of that coverage, it's not going to run up the price all that much for the premium.
Should the property management company require renters insurance?
This is an absolute yes, because there's some things that a renter's insurance policy are going to cover. For example, the tenants run into a garage door, their renter's insurance should cover the cost of making that repair to the garage door. There's things like that. Another example is dog bites. The renter's insurance should cover the cost of, if the tenant's dog, bites someone. One thing that we do, that my company does, is we have a landlord liability policy that's put in place for $100,000 that covers, damage or, things that can be caused at the property until our tenant shows us that they have the renter's insurance put in place.
So the renter's insurance is the responsibility of the renter, not the owner.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a policy that you all have. Is there any other programs that your company does that benefits the owner, like renter's insurance?
We have one other similar, we have one other program. It's called the Resident Benefit Package, and it's paid for, again, by the tenant. And one aspect of that program is that it sends them filters for their heat and air system that they can use to just change out periodically as those arrive in the mail. And again, that's paid for by the tenant, and it really helps out the owner because we all know how important it is to keep those filters changed out to avoid causing damage to those expensive heat and air units.
What expectations should homeowners clearly communicate to their property management company?
Well, and a real important one is communication. How do you prefer to be communicated with? Do you prefer a phone call, email, text message? How hands-off or hands-on do you like to be? Like some of our owners, when we're placing a tenant, they want to know every last detail, and they strictly prohibit us from placing a tenant into the property unless they give their okay. And that's fine with us. But some are much less hands-on, and they just basically say, you guys do your job. Let us know when the tenant, when you have a tenant you're approved, but go ahead and use your best judgment.
When should you put the property up for rent?
It's best to allow as much time as possible before you're actually moved out. You can give us, let's say, even 2 months before you're going to be out of the property. That's great. Our goal is always to minimize the amount of time that your property sits vacant. If we have 2 months to advertise your property, that's wonderful. We can always go in and get photographs, even if you have, furnishings and different items in the property. We can go in there. We can get some nice photos and video. We can even, arrange for limited showings before you're moved out of the property. Because if we can basically get someone moved in right after the U-Haul truck is pulling off, that's a win for everybody. It's a win for the owner, it's a win for the management company, and it's a win for the person moving into the property.
So you mentioned showings. How does that work with showings before the person is moved out of their home?
So sometimes we will arrange for showings even while the person is still living in the home. It's just a matter of simply scheduling with that owner to let them know when our showing is going to be. We're not going to be there every single night of the week, interrupting their dinner and this or that. Well, usually it's a couple times a week, and we'll try to be as conscientious as possible, not to interrupt, the flow of life for the owner, and at the same time get our prospective tenants in to see the property so that we can get a deposit on that.
Thank you, Scott, for answering all of our questions about transforming your home into a rental property. Scott, how can people reach you if they're considering turning their home into a rental property?
Well, contact information is on the website. The best thing that you can do is book in an appointment. Just go click on the button that says schedule a phone meeting and put it on your calendar, and we'll set that up. I'll call you.
And what's the name of your website?
It's myokcpropertymanager.com. myokcpropertymanager.com.
Thank you for answering our questions. And if this was helpful for you, make sure to like, comment, and share. Thanks, and tune in with.